Well, Indianapolis Motor Speedway fans, it's May and it's another Behind the Bricks, but I'm pretty excited about this one and the way we're going to kick this one off because so many of you fell in love with the Indianapolis Motor Speedway when you listened to it on the radio or you watched it on TV. And it was the voices on the radio network in particular that really told the story and painted the picture that we all fell in love with. I remember as a kid listening to qualifying and waiting till the end of the day and having an opportunity on practice days to hear from the radio voices that covered the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in such a way that you really were able to create your own images. And it's what helped us all become so passionate about it. You know, we've only had a handful of radio network voices across the years that the radio is being broadcast. One of them, Sid Collins, is one of the most important voices, maybe one of the most important figures in the Indianapolis Motor Speedway history. Today, we're joined by another one of those who happened to come in after Sid Collins, was a friend of Sid's, a mentor of Sid's, and a voice that we all know that ultimately became the face that we all knew, telling the stories of the Indianapolis 500. The voice of the 500 always will be Paul Page. Paul, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Doug. It's great to be here. I really appreciate this.
You know, I'm going to start right away with something that I think is pretty cool. So you just finished up a book.
Yeah, I did.
And you gave me the pleasure of an opportunity to read it before it was done. And read through it. And I was excited to read it because I love the sport and I knew you would tell us stories of the sport. But what I fell in love with more in it is how you told the stories of Paul Page and how you fell in love with the sport, but all the things, how your career moved back and forth. The theme throughout your career has always been the love for this place. But you just told some amazing stories about your life and the people that you met and what being in radio meant to you, growing up in the military, in a military family, what that's meant to you. Are you excited to have that book finally out and get it out so people can start reading it?
Yeah, I really am. And it's one of those things that when you write something like that, and it's taken over 2.5 years, I've written it with my co-writer, John Elrod. Once it's gone, you're like, oh my goodness, I didn't get this in, or what, did I say this wrong? And believe me, when I sent it to you, I was holding my breath. When I sent you the galley, I was like, oh, he's going to hate this. He's going to knock me down for this or that. And I'm glad that you liked it. We've tried to pick up the book 500 Miles to Go by Al Blemker, ended in 1959. Well, my first race was 1960. So we decided that we were going to hang the tail on all of the races between that and the 100th race. And that's exactly what we did. So we talk about a little of the history of that race, and I talk a little behind the scenes. And it's not a kiss and tell book. It's supposed to be a fun book. Here are some really stupid things that I've done in my life.
And that's what I really liked about it. I think you're right. That's a great way to describe it. It's not a kiss and tell book. It was really a book about and you call them stupid, but really there were just some really fun things. It's neat. You feel like you really get to know Paul Page and you see the passion you have for your customers. The book is awesome. There's no better way to have a book than you on the cover standing at the most iconic racetrack in the world that you've obviously helped build. Did you know Al Blemker?
I did. Yes, I knew Al fairly well.
There's another historic figure, and we haven't talked about any of these behind the bricks, that even today, as I'll read through old documents and things we have around here, you know, Al Blemker's fingerprints are all over this place today.
Yeah, it was kind of, when I look at the Speedway today and back then, for a long time, Al was the only person in the PR department. And then he hired Bill Donaldson, so there were two for the longest time. And just now, with everything that we need to do and all the media we're dealing with now, it's growing. But yeah, you'd walk in the back of the museum there, and there'd be Al sitting at his desk working on a press release.
So I talked about this sort of in the intro, but Sid Collins is one of those voices. When I talk to customers, especially people that have been around for a while, they remember Sid and what that voice meant. And then when you start getting into the next generation, those of us that fell in love with the Speedway through the 70s and 80s, I mean, you are the voice that we think of. You sort of bridged that gap between the longtime Indy 500 customer who listened to the radio and grew up with Sid Collins. And then you took that generation, you ultimately bring them to TV when you get a chance to go to TV. But your relationship with Sid was maybe one of the more special relationships of anybody, at least in the broadcast side of our sport over the last 100 years. It's certainly the one that you had with Sid, and Sid really helped you transition to the job you had today, or you had when you were voice, and then you helped Bob. What did Sid mean to you?
Well, Sid is the voice of the 500. I try not to tread on that, though everybody will say that. He taught me everything. I mean, I got a doctorate degree in broadcasting from Sid. We were both working at then WIBC 1070 AM. He was the sports director and I was a news guy. And one time, and I think you'll find it in the book, I went to cover the soapbox derby. And when I came back, I was so proud of the interview. And Sid's standing in the hallway when I walked through the door, and he's just like, worst interview I've ever heard. So my heart's good because I'm trying to get on a radio network. I'm trying to please him. I'm trying to impress him. But then he took me back in the back studio at the station there on 2835 North Illinois then, and started to teach me how to interview. And everything just took off from there. But at the end of each session, he would also say, now there's no place for you on the radio network. I'm just trying to help you so you can do your stuff well. And then, of course, there was that surprising day. Sid kind of held out on everybody until the last minute as to whether you were going to be involved or you're going to be called back. And Jerry Baker and I were called in on the same day. And we're like, what's happening? I hope this is good. And we tried to be so cool. He did each of us separately. And then when we got out in the parking lot, we were like, whoa, that's the greatest ever.
So what do you recall your first time on the radio network, your first Indy 500, and any moments in there where, how did it feel? Obviously you're excited about it. Were there any moments in there you look back, oh man, I wish I could have done that different, or something of that race that you're really
always,
proud of?
Always. That's one of the things about doing the Indy 500. It's a gigantic piece of history. And so as a broadcaster, and all of the other broadcasters, Mark Janes, everybody else who does it, Lee Diffie, will tell you, I'm sure, that you can't make any mistakes, because if you do, it'll be a year before you can properly correct them. So you really guard against anything like that. I had, I hope, few, but maybe the audience did or did not catch them. It's and you'll know this as well. It's sometimes that you do something that it's wrong, but nobody else does. So you've essentially faked them out.
100%. That happens to me every day. Favorite place to broadcast here at the Speedway, when you're on the radio network or TV, location that to you just felt like the place you should be for broadcasting?
From the moment I walked into the grounds in 1960, even before the race started, just watching the traditional ceremonies, I'm hooked. I got to be part of that. I got to, I can watch parts, you name it. But at the time, I'm of course in high school, and they had some radio television courses where I was, and so I started taking them, thinking, well, maybe I could be a newsman and cover it, and then maybe I could talk to Sid. And so it built itself up. But I was just so totally hooked. And in fact, that day I was up in the B grandstands in the first turn, and Tom Carnegie opened, as he always does, to do such a thing. He said, "Here at the starting line," and he interviewed, some significant person. And after I stopped doing it on television, I was walking down the pits, and there was Tom, and he said, "Paul, come here." And I figured he just wanted to talk about something, and he turned around and he said, "Here at the starting line." Oh my, you talk about bookends. That's the best.
Yeah, absolutely. You got to broadcast the Indy 500, and maybe it just shows that we're older, but it was the most colorful and I think entertaining era that the history of our sport. All the drivers that raced in the day when you were getting to cover the race, both on radio and then ultimately on TV. How did you first learn the transition was going to happen when you were going to go from radio to becoming not just the voice, but the voice and the face of the Indianapolis 500 on ABC?
Well, in 1986, ABC finally decided to do the race live, and Bobby went over right away. Bobby just left me. I was pretty, I wasn't upset at all. But so the 86 and the 87 race was done live. But at the end of the 87 race, I think ABC wanted to get more involvement with people who really understood it a little better. Yep. They had Sam and Bobby, And so they asked me, well, I had the perfect job. I was on radio. And what's more, I was working for NBC Sports in New York. So I could always be at the race. And it was a perfect deal. I didn't have to worry about anything else. But then when they asked me to do television, it's like, that's a whole different medium. People think that television pictures help you, but actually the screen is so small, it doesn't really help you much at all, and you have to add stuff into it. So yeah, when I finally went over, which was in '88, working with Sam and Bobby, one on either side of me in the booth, and the two of them always contradicting one another. I think that's some of the greatest television ever.
It's funny how people still talk to this day about Sam
Yeah.
Posey, and obviously Bobby Unser and his opinions, and he had no problem disagreeing with people and telling like he was. We just lost Bobby recently. It's been challenging for a lot of us. I would say to tell me your best Bobby Unser story, but you probably can't tell that one.
I can't tell the best one.
How fun was it to work with Bobby Unser, and how frustrating at the same time was it to work with Bobby Unser? Because one of the things that made Bobby Unser so special is Bobby Unser was the best race car driver ever, and Bobby Unser was the best broadcaster ever. And that was Bobby's opinion, and it's what made him so special. How was it to work alongside him?
It was really a treat. You were kind of scared to death and really happy that he's there at the same time, because you never knew what he was going to say. And there were a couple of times in the broadcast that he said things that I don't know how to respond to that. So and over in turn 4, they're doing this. But yeah, he understood television for himself. He didn't understand much of the technicalities, but one thing that I've always said about Bobby, he was really intellectually honest. And that is to say, if he didn't understand something, he would just worry you and keep asking questions until he did understand it. And I really admired that in Bobby. And of course, he had an incredible curiosity. A Bobby story for you. And this is so typical of Bobby. We were in Phoenix, and we're driving along on the Camelback, and the Camelback Mountain is just alongside us there. And Bobby's he's the passenger, because we wouldn't let Bobby drive. And
smart move.
He said, "Look at that house up there. Wow, that's the greatest house. Oh, that's neat. Let's go up there." I'm like, "Bobby, you can't go. It's a very, very high-end neighborhood. No, turn right here, turn." So I followed him. We went up the house. So we're sitting in front of the house. He says, "That's such a great house." I said, "Yeah, this is a beautiful house, Bobby. I'm going to see if we can go in." And he jumps out of the car and goes up and knocks on the door. I'm not going up to the door yet, but I can hear him. And the woman opens the door and says, "Yes." And he says, "Hi." I'm going to mimic Bobby. "Hi, I'm Bobby Unser, the fastest man alive. And this is such a beautiful home. I would like to see it. I'm a 3-time winner of the Indianapolis 500. And the woman said, "Why, sure, I'd be honored to show it to you." Bobby could get away with that. The rest of us, we'd get arrested in a minute. There'd be cops putting handcuffs on.
Absolutely. But that is really what
typical.
made him so special, right? He said it, like you said, intellectually honest. He told it like it was. He had that spirit of a teenager. Even to the last day that I saw him, he was struggling to get around, but there was that spirit of a teenager in him that was always wanting to explore, always wanting to interact. Hall of Famer he was.
Yeah.
You this year inducted alongside Bobby Unser as a Hall of Famer. Did you ever think in your life that you would be in the same Hall of Fame alongside people like A.J. Foyt, Mario Andretti, and Bobby Unser, and Sid Collins?
No, it brings a tear to my eye. It's knowing that happened for me. I haven't done an Indy 500 on television since 2004, and I've done stuff in the past years for radio. And you just kind of figure, well, time goes on, people forget, but they didn't, and they appreciated what I did, and so that made life really complete. I'm beginning to choke up now. So ask another question.
The neat thing about that process is those ballots go out to a lot of folks. And in order to get in there, you have to get 75% of everybody has to vote for you. So it's not like you were the top vote getter, because even if you were a top vote getter and you didn't get 75%, you don't get in. And it really says an awful lot about what you've meant to the sport, not just as a commentator, but really just your personality has been so great for the sport. I talk about Hall of Famers, to get to be enshrined at the same year and the same time as Michael Schumacher has to be
Yeah.
special as well.
Yeah, that's the yin and the yang, isn't it? Since little Paul here and a 7-time Formula One champion, world champion there, that's special too.
Yeah, it's special. But there's hundreds of thousands of Indianapolis Motor Speedway fans that'll take you all day over Michael Schumacher just because of the pictures that you painted for us.
You know what? If I can, what really got to me was when I hadn't been inducted, but the voting was over. This was the second year I was in line, and guys like Billy Vukovich and Lee Koonsman, I'd see him at lunch occasionally, and real insiders and the old guys said, "I voted for you. I hope you get it." You know, that's again, I'm going to tear up.
No, it is a special honor, and it's neat. And you've really, your life's work has been all over the place. You've done all kinds of great things, but it's all sort of tied back to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and it's an exciting moment for those of us who fell in love with the sport because of people like you. So it really do appreciate that. Talk one thing, and you probably get tired of talking about this, but I'm from Indianapolis and I know it. What's it like to be in a helicopter that's crashing?
Oh, yeah, 1977 and 1st of December. I don't know why that date sticks in my mind. We were actually flying over. I was working in the WIBC traffic helicopter, and it's all in the book. The book, my people say, do this, do that. There's the book.
We're going to talk about it again, so don't worry. We're going to make sure.
Okay. And we heard a loud crack, and I look over at the pilot, and he gives me this worried look, and so we decide, okay, we're going to head for the airport. And so we turn west, and just over the North 40, we hear another loud crack. And then the helicopter just stops responding to commands. And I'm thinking, oh, that's cool, because we have auto rotation. Everybody knows about that, and we're going to be fine. Well, what had happened was the gear that drives the main rotor shaft disintegrated. And so the main rotor shaft just stopped. And I realized I'm looking at a stopped blade out there. And by that time, we're passing over the Speedway High School, and I realize what we're in for. And I'm then, geez, you don't want to hit that high school. I'm not sure that was my thought, but it certainly was my thought afterwards. And I'm only amnesic to the impact. We hit on a high school athletic field. And that's one of those moments in your life when you start to take stock of things and make sure that you're doing everything right and you're hopefully treating people right.
Yeah, it's a scary moment, but it's one of those ones that when you talk about Paul Page and you start talking about 2 or 3 things, that's always a conversation that comes up. So I was in an event last night. We were doing a speech talking a little bit about the month of May and how important it is, but it was a fundraiser for a group on the north side of Indianapolis that raises money to help out law enforcement, first responder families when they lose one of their loved ones in the line of duty. And my wife is, Beth, well,
yeah, I know
was
Beth.
talking to a former Air Force pilot, Navy pilot, who starts telling the story of talking and getting you prepared for your first flight in the backseat of a jet.
Oh no!
So I've talked to a lot of people. How did you do on that flight? That's got to be a fun experience too, getting to ride in the back, especially being somebody that grew up in and around the military.
Well, I love aviation, still did after the crash. I don't like riding in ambulances, but after the crash, I still enjoyed riding an aircraft. And so we had wanted to ask the drivers at ABC, we wanted to ask the drivers, if there wasn't racing, what would you be doing right now? And Rick Mears came back, he'd like to be a fighter pilot landing on aircraft carriers. So we called the Navy and a lot of negotiation. Can we do this? And we did. We went out to the USS Theodore Roosevelt and shot Rick landing on a carrier. He actually got two traps. And the crew and all of us, we got a trap too, because we flew out on what they call the COD, the carrier on the door delivery. It's a dual prop. And somebody there said, you need to ride in one. So we went down to Bob Goodrich, our producer, and I. Went down to Jacksonville, Florida, and yeah, we got a ride in a real honest to goodness FA-18 Hornet, and it was great. And then the Blue Angels also gave me a couple of flights too. And when I got in the Blue Angels, I knew we were going to do some weird stuff. And I thought everybody had told me Bruce Jenner, Caitlin, was an aerobatic pilot, and I'd flown with him quite a bit. And his advice always was, look out to the wingtip, and it'll help orient you. And so I got in, I'm looking out to the wingtip, and there's no wingtip because they're swept behind you.
Right.
And you don't have a G suit when you fly with the Blues. You did when you fly with the tactical jet. So, getting the vertical rolls and everything, I loved every minute of it. And the great thing was, I was down at El Centro in California, which is where the Blues do their training in the winter. And they said, "You want to fly it?" Absolutely. Give me that stick. And so I did some vertical rolls for myself. It's always easier when you're doing it yourself. Yeah. And after I did a couple of things, the pilot said, "Hey, you've flown before." No, I do not have a pilot's license. I've never have. But yeah, it was so much fun. It was so cool.
It's neat that you did that, because I think your love for motorsport and aviation, especially jets like that, there is so many similarities there. I'm going to ask you a couple more questions, and I want to talk about the book a little bit more, and then we'll let you go.
Sure.
Favorite racing personality that you've dealt with beyond the obvious? There are the Marios and the AJs. I mean, you've dealt with the best of the best. Is there anybody that's sort of obscure that you would think of as, wow, I really loved interacting with this personality inside of sport? Doesn't have to be a driver, it can be any personality in and around our sport.
Well, right off, I would say George Bignotti, chief mechanic with all those wins, and because he approached me. I mean, he knew that I wanted to actually cover the race, and he started telling me little secrets and stuff like that. And I'd say, I'll never reveal that, but thank you very much. And so we developed a friendship, and his wife, Kay, the same thing. And she'd help me along, but she's Louis Meyer's daughter. And so now I'm getting history and I'm getting input. So George Bignotti and Kay Bignotti were two that I would immediately say were very influential. And then Louis Meyer, I used to just sit with him and he'd tell me stories. I'll tell you one you probably don't know, and you're the president of the Speedway. That the seatbelt was invented at the Speedway. Did you know that?
I did not know that.
Well, according to Louis Meyer, it was, but not for the purpose that it's used now. He said when we had riding mechanics, we'd take a rope and tie them in so they wouldn't jump out at a pit stop. That was a typical Louis Meyer story.
Yeah, because they wanted out probably by then, right?
Right,
Exactly. A little bit of time letting somebody else drive you around this place, especially back in Louis' day.
Yep.
So the other one's maybe a little bit tougher question. Good friend of yours, a guy that ends up being the voice of the 500 really because of you, and he tells a story in a previous Behind the Bricks about how you helped and surprised him with the idea and asked him to be the voice of the 500. Bob Jenkins, obviously going through a tough time. We're all praying for him. Hundreds and hundreds of cards have literally come to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway that we've delivered to him.
That's good.
What's your version? I'd be curious to hear if your version is the same of his, of how he said you invited him over and you had a glass of wine. He was unsure what was going to happen. Then the next thing you know, you're telling him, "Hey, it's your turn, buddy." How did it go from your angle?
Well, Bob and I had been friends for a long time before that. And I knew, we talked about racing. That's all we talked about. It was all I ever talked about. And so I knew he wanted to be involved. And I was kind of following Sid's technique of don't let anybody know until just before. You may want to change something. I don't know why he did that, but nevertheless, I finally decided Bob's got to be involved. And so I invited him over and I poured out the wine. And I said, "Here, drink this. I'll give you a toast. And this is to you as the newest member of the Indianapolis Motor Speedway Radio Network." And I'm glad he didn't drop the glass because I thought he was about to. He just he loves it as much as I do, if not more. And we did a lot of fun things together. In 1978, we started the first all series, the whole Champ Car series radio network, and it was just Bob and I and Tom Alibrandi, an engineer, and Gloria Novotny was our coordinator. And so, and that was not when you have all stuff like Zoom and things like that. Right. You had to hook up wires to where you were and all the little stations. And So it was quite an effort, but we got through the whole year with it, and we became even closer. And then when ESPN, I was working at NBC doing CART, and when ESPN was starting, they got us involved, and specifically they called me and said, "Hey, we're going to do a race." They weren't on the air yet. "We're going to do a race at Eldora Speedway, super speedway. And would you come over and produce it for us? We know you're an announcer, so you can't do that." But I said, "Yeah." And then you got to hire the guys. Wow. So I hired Larry Newber and Bob.
Yep.
And Bob was a lot taller than Larry, so I had to go get a cinder block for Larry to stand on so that they were equal. And Larry, God bless his soul, he got a briefcase that was proper height and would withstand his weight, so he'd do his on cameras. But Bob and I had so much fun together. The jobs, from time to time we wouldn't be together, especially when he was doing so much with NASCAR. But like I say, Bob loves it more than me. He's just he's a beautiful human being, a beautiful man.
He really is. And I said I was only asking you 2 questions, but I've got another one I meant to ask earlier. And a lot of people may not know this. I do, because, man, obviously being here at the Speedway, working here, and then Project 100, we ripped the roof off of the paddock penthouses and put new rows up and a new roof. But one of the buildings that was up there was a little shack that was the television booth for when you broadcast the race. What always fascinates me about the talent that broadcasters have, and you touched on a little bit earlier, you really don't see the entire event. You're watching what the producers are giving you on a screen. Could you see any of the race from inside that television booth on the roof?
No, but the producer wanted a good background shot, so we could go out there and we get the background shot with the tower and the old control tower, with the pylon and the old control tower behind us. In '89, when I'm watching Fittipaldi and Al Unser Jr. battling, and when I saw the finishes with Scott Goodyear and all those, I had to literally climb on top of the monitor and put my head up against the glass to be able to just get a hint of what was going on the main straightaway. Bobby, of course, Sam too, thought that was so funny. Here's Paul climbing up over the monitor and trying to see what it is. There were some good stories came out of that booth.
Oh, I'm absolutely sure there's some good stories that came out of that booth. What that tells me, though, is, and I think that's why it's just like Bob Jenkins, why people really loved you, is because they knew you were a fan. I mean, I know you were doing that to help tell the story, but you could have seen it on a camera. It's only a fan that's climbing up over a monitor and putting his face up against glass so he can look right down and see it with his own eyes. And we really appreciate the fact that you told us the story as an expert, but first as a fan, and delivered the story so well. So finally, I do want to talk a little bit more about the book. And I know there was 2+ years in the making. There's some great stories in there. As you were writing the book, you obviously had an idea of some of the stories. Are there any stories that came to you that you've forgotten about as you were writing the book? You said, "Oh my gosh, I just remember this story. I think I need to include it."
Well, when you're writing the book, and I was writing it with John Elrod, you're constantly trying to remember things. I was foolish. I never kept a journal. And anybody that's out there now, please keep a journal, because you're going to want it for yourself, if nothing else, later. So my best way of reviewing Indy 500 races was to watch videos of the race, but not look in the foreground, look in the background. Who's running fourth back there and on a pit stop? Oh, look at that. He's over the wall. I know that guy. I got a story about that guy. So that's kind of how that all came to pass. And as I said earlier, the fact that the book's done now and in the stores, there's another book in my brain. Public probably am going to want it, but I remember so many other stories, and I'm going to write them down, if nothing else, than for myself.
So tell everybody here how they can get the book, where they can find it. The one thing about Indy 500 fans is they love our history. And a lot of us have memorized winners and all the different things that you do as an Indy 500 fan. But what I've really come to appreciate are the stories in the books like you've written that tell it from your eyes, and you're a personality that we know And it's not focused just on one driver. It's fun to read about one driver, but what I really appreciate about your book is this story is about everybody. Cool stories that you're not going to see in a box score. So tell everybody where they can get the book and how it's available. And hopefully, as we get through these COVID challenges here, we'll have a point in time where we can get you out to the Speedway with the books and an opportunity for people to get some autographs and shake your hand and thank you for all the wonderful work you've done of helping us all become better Indy 500 fans.
Appreciate that. I appreciate it a lot. Yes. Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, bookstores throughout Indianapolis, hoping for the gift shop at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. Figured that might be a cool place. In fact, we're hoping to drop the book, make its debut out at the Speedway, but the way things are changing so much, who knows? I may be out on 16th and Bridgetown. Here's the book. Can anybody want the book? So, yeah.
We can do a mug and bun autograph session. We'll go over and we'll eat some hot dogs and hamburgers and some root beer and get folks to come out and enjoy your book. Well, Paul, I sincerely thank you so much for appreciate you coming on. Thank you for the stories. Thank you for the passion that you have to this day. You know, race fans, it doesn't go a month or two without a note from Paul Page that says, if you need me, I'm here. I'll do whatever it takes. And it's not because Paul Page is asking for a paycheck. It's because he cares about your experience at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway and because he loves it like we all do. Paul, thank you so much for spending time with us. We can't wait to see you here in a few weeks. And I'll see you here over the next several years as we continue to get our Indy 500 back on track and back to those 300,000 plus fans that you and I are used to.
Oh, that would be terrific. And as you know, it's more than just me. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, including you, who have the same passion for the place. It's not work ever. It's what can I do to make this better, more interesting. I loved every minute of it.
Well, thank you, Paul. You know, as we lead into oval practice, racing for the 105th running of the Indianapolis 500 by Gainbridge, we know that those NTT IndyCar Series drivers are awesome at what they do behind the wheel. But how good are they, do you think, when you start asking them some questions about pop culture and some other things that are going on outside of the race car? Well, check this out, and you got an answer of how much they really know when they're outside of a race car.
Usually cooked to some extent, over medium maybe.
That's complicated.
How do you like your eggs?
Scrambled. I would say sunny side up.
Why is it complicated?
Because I like scrambled eggs, I like poached eggs, I like sunny side up, I like fried eggs. So yeah, I like all eggs in many ways.
So I like poached eggs a lot, which are very runny, but nice.
I don't know.
Plush from Stone Temple Pilots probably my go-to.
Danger Zone, Kenny Loggins, obviously.
And I feel it.
Colt 45.
When the dogs defined her, I got time to wait for tomorrow.
I know the words to Every Time We Touch by Cascada. Don't ask me why I know that.
Can you sing it?
I know it. Cause every time we touch, I get this feeling, and every time we kiss, I swear I can fly.
Not to me, no.
No. No. Pineapple's not. Oh, I mean, you could put anything on a pizza, but does it go? I don't think, but it's my opinion.
Yes.
Definitely not. Should be illegal.
What pizza topping?
If you put pineapple on a pizza, I swear to God, I will hunt you down and I will cut you.
So thank you all for joining us on Behind the Bricks. We look forward to seeing you here very soon at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway.